I am here with the NWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis. Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Raj. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah, it's been a weird year. Obviously, I definitely don't need to be saying that, but the NWA was starting to getting some real momentum last year. Now they paused. Things are starting to kind of reopen with a lot of different organizations. ROH starting to tape again. MLW is looking to do that as well. Where is the NWA in terms of reopening?
Uh, well, our focus now is primarily on Primetime Live with United Wrestling Network. So that opportunity was presented to us kind of as a combined unit. At Thunder Studios in Long Beach, California. It's a really cool facility, and the opportunity to have a time slot every week live on FITE and on in-demand pay-per-view seemed like a way to ease back in to doing some shows that we can basically focus on our core audience and ask for a small pay-per-view fee for sort of key matchups that we want to book and promote, and then it gives us a vehicle to make the kind of content that has sort of defined the NWA pre-Power. Was very much in the build videos, in the long form kind of doc series like 10 Pounds of Gold. So we're sort of getting back to a condensed model that's kind of that's a variation of that, but on a more kind of regular basis. So, for example, this first one we're going ahead with myself and Mike Bennett in the main event. We felt like Mike had an interesting story to tell, and that's really what we've always tried to do in the space to make ourselves different, is to pick the guys that we feel have the unique story to tell, and tell it in a way that other shows are not always able to do, because they've got to try to fit so many guys, into so many segments, and with a set schedule. We don't have that. We have the ability to kind of luxuriate on a story like we did with Tim Storm, or with me, or with other people that we've worked with, and that's proven to be the way that's been successful for us, because ultimately, people have got to care about you before they pay to see you, or before they watch your show. If we'd have come right out of the blocks with Power, I dare say that people still would have, the show still would have received an amount of critical acclaim because of its, because of the quality and the production and then the uniqueness of it, compared to, all the other stuff being done. But it wouldn't have had the same impact, because they wouldn't have cared about the key characters. They wouldn't have cared about me and Tim, and Camille, and later on in Thunder Rosa, and other people that we've been able to kind of build off of that. And we did that with, really we started with the 10 Pounds of Gold series. My whole thing on wrestling has always been, I'd rather have one match that people care about than 10 matches that nobody cares about.
Right.
There's a lot of volume now,
Right.
and we're trying to focus on quality.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I'm an old school wrestling fan from the '80s. Randy Savage, Roddy Piper. It was always the characters and the stories that hooked me in first, and then match quality and everything that was great after that. But it was getting the people in the door and excited, and I feel like that's something that you guys have done great. The 10 Pounds of Gold videos always reminded me of kind of those UFC countdown videos that if you don't know who they are, you get into it by the time you're done watching it.
Right.
And I think that you guys have done a fantastic job. Do you see yourself more involved creatively than you were before, since Dave Lagana had left? Or are you still, is everyone still kind of in their same roles?
I'm definitely, well, I mean, I was heavily involved anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think that's any secret. The only thing that I've taken more of an active role in since David's departure is some of the actual physical production of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
simply because you know that we've defined a certain style for ourselves, and we sort of realized in our period of inactivity that it was going to take just as long again to find somebody with the skill set, but then also to kind of get them up to speed on how we tell the story, because previously the relationship was basically, a lot of it I would describe in my mind's eye what I could see, and then David would put it into action. Now I'm certainly not doing it alone, but I've taken more of an active role in that, and the NWA is never one person. We had some incredible production talent, working on power and working on post-production, like Karen Tran and Billy Trask, Dan Schramm, and others, Ari Dalton. So a lot of it is just sort of piecing together input from different people, and obviously it's all overseen by Billy. Billy's the final say on everything. Billy's the overriding kind of creative vision. So that's, I've taken on more of a role, but that's out of necessity, and I'm enjoying it. But obviously, we still want to try and maintain some of that separation of church and state, as a talent. But I think at the moment, everyone kind of gives us a pass on that, because I think that I've proven that I don't think that anyone's looking at me and thinking that I'm sort of operating exclusively in my own interest. Right. I think if I was, I think I would have taken the offer to go to AEW, So I think that there's an understanding there that I've sort of, I took I planted my flag in the ground with this entity, for as long as I can, for as long as we can, survive and thrive.
Right. Now that you have worn several other hats with the promotion outside of just talent, are there things that have interested you more than you thought they would have? Like you'd like to maybe down the road explore getting into it more?
The simple answer is yes, but I think I always had that interest. Yeah. I don't think I've discovered that whilst doing it. I think I always sort of knew in the back of my mind that was what I had an eye on, down the road. I mean, look, I've been very forthcoming with that. One of the reasons that I decided to stay put and to really sort of double down on this sort of bet was because one day I hope that I can have a stake. That's the reality of it. Like if I'm gonna be serious about it, I may as well try to. I've done so much to build and define the brand now at this point that I would, eventually like to earn the opportunity to have an ownership stake in it. As and when that was a necessary thing to do. So I mean, I've always had that in my mind. Really, almost from the beginning.
Yeah. And have you broached that subject with Billy? Does he kind of know that's where you'd like to see yourself headed?
Sure. Yeah, we've had that conversation, and he's been open to it. It's just one of those things where it's established, like, yeah, I know that that's what you want, and we're open to that conversation, somewhere down the road, probably when my contract comes up.
Yeah. You guys have had some great, I talked earlier about characters and promos, and you guys have really been, in my opinion, at the forefront. Like, in my opinion, the best promos have been coming, from the NWA between, yourself, Eli Drake, James Storm, Eddie Kingston, so many Ricky Starks who are now with AEW, but that's where, like, it really, I thought caught my attention. Do you see wrestling kind of shifting back to those strong promos? Because I feel like we don't see enough of it anymore.
Oh, well, that I 100% agree with. I don't know if it's shifting back. It's hard to make broad statements on the business, because obviously you have one company that has such a large market share, and
Right.
their product is so vastly different, both in terms of their execution and in their philosophy, to almost everybody else. So I hope that it is, because I think that, to me, I think the business is 50% wrestling and 50% promos. I don't think that I think that somewhere along the way in the last sort of 20 years, the business sort of became a little fascinated with critical sort of feedback from a very specific, discerning audience, and this narrative emerged that the wrestling was most important. And I absolutely disagree with that. Now look, I think we can all agree that the overall quality from top to bottom in terms of physical talent has improved, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the overall quality of the stuff in the ring, in my opinion, necessarily is, because, and this is just me talking, a big part of my enjoyment of the industry is in suspension of disbelief. And I find it very hard to suspend my disbelief in a lot of the product that I watch now. And one of the reasons that I decided to really double down on the NWA was because I had spent my career sort of learning and working on a storytelling kind of style. I'm a good athlete. Like, there's, I'm not gonna shy away from that. But I'm not a gymnast. I'm a and I think that when I see some matches that they feel like sort of one long high spot, and for me that's difficult to. That it's impressive, but just on a very sort of surface level. I don't get a sort of deep emotional connection with what's happening. I don't feel like I'm watching a sport, and this again, I'm just speaking for me. I want to feel like I'm watching a sport with the volume turned up.
Right.
You know what I mean? I want to feel like I'm watching a great prize fight. To me, I feel like the whole origin of pro wrestling as we know it stemmed from the fact that, you see it now with mixed martial arts and with boxing, but boxing obviously historically, for the longest time has, along with wrestling, is the oldest sport, right? Because it's fighting,
right?
Basically, Dana White, I heard him say I heard him doing a seminar or a podcast once, and he said that everyone around the world, plays different sports. People he used cricket as an example, and he said, like, there's, in India and in England and in parts of cricket's a huge sport, but in other parts of the world, they have no idea what it is,
right.
And you couldn't possibly, it's like, what is this? And people have the same feeling about American sports. They're like, baseball, what's the point? American football, okay, cool, I get it. But two people fighting is understandable in any language to any culture, because it's a human level,
right?
And now I believe that the progression of pro wrestling and the reason that pro wrestling has survived and been viable for such a long time is because the only thing with real fighting, for lack of a better term, is that sometimes it ain't that interesting.
Right.
It's sometimes, like, it can be built up and it can be, but there's no guarantee that it can meet your expectations. I always felt like the point of wrestling was to basically create all that and guarantee that it would meet your expectations by giving an exciting contest, right? So, you know, it stemmed from the carnivals. Like, guys were having 2-hour matches that ended in a draw, and they were, you know, and they're basically just sort of grappling with each other and trying to grab a hold or trying to grab a front face lock, and everyone was going, all right, I'm gonna kill myself. Until eventually they went, okay, look, we're beating the hell out of each other, and we're gonna do it all again tomorrow or next week or whenever. Why don't you win this one? I'll win the next one, and then we'll have a tiebreaker, you know, and that way we'll make more money. And it's like that, to me, you know, I wish more people kept that in mind when they were looking at the way they approach the business, because ultimately I'm trying to reach people on a human level. Like, I'm trying to create packages and an outcome and a contest or a simulated contest that makes people go, oof, like, I'm ready to see this. You know, like, this is going to be a war. This is going to be a contest between two guys or two girls who really want it. You know, they don't always have to hate each other's guts. You know, they don't always have to be sociopaths, or, you know, they don't always have to like run each other over with a car, or, you know, it doesn't always have to be sort of sober. Sometimes it can just be, I'm better than you. No, I'm better than you. Okay, let's prove it. Or, hey, you have something that I want. In our case, the world's championship.
Right.
And that's really my underlying philosophy on the whole business.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, I feel like the UFC has kind of taken over that storytelling in a lot of ways, where and it's great to see you guys doing it again, because I have missed that.
They'll never. The thing with the UFC is that and that kind of ties into what you were saying about promos for the NWA. The reason that we put such an emphasis on promos, especially with Power, with the podium and the stickman and everything, was because there are, when someone comes along in the UFC who can actually cut a half decent promo, they're considered like this crazy, larger than life, unbelievable character, like Conor McGregor. Yeah, Conor McGregor is an incredibly charismatic guy. You know, and he is a very talented talker. But, you know, if you send him out on the NWA Power set and had him cut, he wouldn't cut a promo that blew one of mine away, or blew one of Eli's away, or Tim Storm's, or James Storm's, or, you know, or Eddie Kingston's, or, you know, it wouldn't. Like, it would be good, you know, but if the fame levels were the same, you know, and you sent them, you know, it would be entertaining, but it wouldn't be this like groundbreaking thing. Right. And that's where wrestling, again, you know, you can't compete with UFC for, like, you know, on the fundamental level, because it's real. You can't do worked MMA and then just, you know, and then be like, oh yeah, see, we can do it too. But what you can do is go, look, I challenge any of your roster to talk like this. You know what I mean? On a regular basis, especially with a stickman. Yeah. Because the reason I love stickman interviews is because, regardless of how much preparation has gone into it, it feels more organic. Right. Like, whether, you know, no one really knows. You know, who's to say? We don't, like, but when you watch our show, has there ever been a point where you've watched it and you've thought, that feels scripted? Right. You know, like, that feels contrived and, you know, overproduced. No, because there's an interviewer there sort of filling in the gaps and kind of, you know, moving things along. Right. And like that, you know, I always, even in TNA, I would always say, hey, can I do this promo with JB? Instead of just walking out to the ring with a microphone for no reason, which, when you really break it down, it's such a weird thing to do. It's just you just don't walk outside and walk to the middle. Right. Like, boxers don't walk out to the ring like when they're not boxing someone and just start talking, you know, like they do it at a press conference, or they do it in an interview set, they do it somewhere else. It's like just little things like that. It's like we fall into these formulaic traps based on the success of one thing. Like, wrestling's notorious for like what me and some of the guys at TNA used to call golden goose disease, which is like, hey, that one thing worked. Let's do it over and over and over again until it's completely dead. Yeah. Hey, this golden goose is laying eggs. Let's cut it open, you know, like, and that's, and it's like, so let's say the pioneer of the in-ring, you know, walk out to the ring with a microphone promo is The Rock, right? Like, you know, he was the guy that went, you know, that you didn't care. Like you wanted to see that, right? No one was going, oh God, why is he walking out to the ring? It's like, it's The Rock.
Right.
But not everybody can do that.
Right.
Conversely, Flair, all of Flair's iconic promos, even on Nitro, were still with Mean Gene.
Right.
They were just, he started doing them in the ring, but prior to that, it was Tony Schiavone, or it was, whoever, like, David Crockett or whoever on the set. The idea being that it felt like it was a happening, right? And he was talking to you. He was talking to you at home. And that's what we wanted to create with Power. We wanted people to feel like, well, he's talking to me.
Right. Yeah. And it definitely, to your point, feels way more organic, more realistic. I mean, that's how wrestling used to do it. WWF back in the day. I mean, that they always had those stickman interviews. And yeah, I agree 100%. My favorite match at All In was yourself and Cody because of the story that it told and the 10 pounds of gold video packages and just that was what is my favorite kind of wrestling. Your feud with Tim Storm, things like that. Eli Drake, I think, is just fantastic. How hard was it when AEW did want you to come over to turn that down?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you feel like the train is leaving the station without you a little bit, because you knew that it was going to be this big thing that everyone was talking about, and you knew it was going to take all this oxygen, and it was very tempting to think like, wow, this could be validation for my the last sort of year and a half at the time, because this was January of 2019,
right.
So I mean, it was like early days. And honestly, that was a big factor in my decision, because I knew that the TV wasn't going to start until the fall. And in my mind, I was kind of, I wasn't sure that I had built up enough momentum yet to be able to last through to that time. I was worried that by the time we got to the end of the year, people would kind of go, oh yeah, I forgot he's on it too. And I just didn't want to be that guy, because I had worked too hard to, like with All In, which is 2 years ago today, I had worked too hard with all those different things to I wanted people to feel like when I step in the ring with the title, like I wanted people to feel like this is a big deal. Like this is a happening, I don't have to be I don't have to be considered like the best wrestler, in the business. I don't have to be number one on the PWI, 500. And I don't have to be like, I don't need to have people sort of saying, oh, he's the best. And, but I just wanted, when I wrestle, I want people to be like, this would be interesting. Cool. Yeah. I'm ready to see that. Because that's how I felt when I just wanted to feel, I wanted to have, situations that made somebody at home feel the same way I felt when I watched like Rock and Triple H or, Sting or, whoever. And then after I became a student of the game, the feeling I had the first time I watched Flair and Steamboat, or like Flair and Harley, and these guys just going like, wow, like it's just a different atmosphere. Like WWF was very, like, no one can deny Hogan's star power, right? But it was like, Hogan was almost like Cornette's analogy was spot on when on the Flair thing, when he said that the NWA was the Boston Celtics and the WWF was the Harlem Globetrotters. Like the WWF, like the crowd it was a frenzy, but it was like more of a kind of celebration. Like, yay! Like we're at a WWF show. Yay! It's Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? There wasn't. There was very obviously when he wrestled Savage or wrestled Warrior, like when he had those big matches, that you had that feeling. But there was something different about like the peak NWA stuff in the '80s, where you could just feel the audience were like it's really important who wins this. Like, and we're here to see a fight. Like it's vitally important that Barry Windham beats Ric Flair. It's vitally important that Sting beats Flair. It's like whoever wins this is the heavyweight champion of the world. Like JR would do such a good job of conveying the importance of that. And I wanted to recreate that.
Yeah, and Those are my favorite times back in the day when I was growing up.
Me
So
too.
I totally appreciate that. That it's still out there. I did want to ask you too. Now with Thunder Rosa, I know you've been asked a lot this lately, but with her, this is the first time we're seeing AEW working with an American promotion on TV. Is this just a one-off, or is this just kind of testing the waters a little bit, or are we? I'm guessing if it's something bigger, you probably can't say it anyway. But what's going on?
All I know at this point in time, and this is the truth. Yeah, and you're right. If there was more to it, I probably wouldn't be able to say. But I genuinely don't know. But it was just a situation where they approached Billy and expressed their interest in wanting to book this sort of prize fight sort of match, and I don't know. I mean, I probably should know, but I wasn't sure if there was any history prior to AEW and the NWA between Rosa and Hikaru Shida, but I know that Rosa's wrestled in Japan a lot, so I don't know. It was just one of those things where it was presented, and we saw I mean, it was a no-brainer. We said that sounds like a good idea. It's ultimately we were very confident in the reaction it would get. But we were very confident that the fans would bite and feel like this was special, because Rosa is special and the NWA is special. We're, if it's obvious that they've been paying attention, otherwise, that it's based on the fact that they signed Ricky and they signed Eddie Kingston, and and nothing against Ricky, for example, but like no one went to bat harder than me for him. Because I couldn't believe that he was so relatively unknown. When I saw his stuff, I went, wow, this guy's like TV ready. But he wasn't someone that people were talking about. Like, I was the one kind of pressing Billy and going, we need to bring this guy in. And obviously he's had, great success now, but it's validating for the NWA, and it's validating for our approach and our philosophy. And I think if everyone involved can put their egos to the side and can look at the bigger picture for sustainability, for the over, for a genuine alternative to the WWE, which has an overwhelming market share, I think it makes all the sense in the world for a much broader and more succinct relationship going forward, where we're able to maintain our own distinctive brand and style, and they can do the same with theirs, and we can coexist, and we can take advantage of their resources and they can take advantage of our approach and production capability, in terms of our creative, basically, for lack of a better term. And obviously the other thing is it's the brand. You can't people had so many sideways comments when Billy bought the rights to the NWA. They went, oh, what's the point in that? Like, no one cares about that anymore. Well, they sure did. We sure reminded them quick. And, you can make up, obviously AEW is starting from square one, in terms of historical significance and sort of bragging rights and the value that comes with that. Aside from the WWE, there is no other American brand that can offer that sort of historical significance like the NWA. So I think, and the fact that they're on Turner, there's a lot there that can, again, if if they're doing their homework, and I'm sure Tony is, because he's a very astute guy, and he does a lot of research. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that there's a great number of fans, particularly in the South, who left the genre altogether when WCW went away.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the combination of their positioning on Turner and our brand and historical significance of it can really do a lot to bring a lot of those people back, and could potentially reignite and grow the overall audience for the entire industry.
Yeah, and I guess as you're speaking for yourself, would you be interested in doing stuff as a representative for the NWA on their television? And if so, who would be some of the guys you'd want to work with over there?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Ultimately, it's about providing the stage and the platform for me to showcase myself and to showcase the title and the brand and the legacy of the NWA. But it's also about me. It's also about me trying to to carve out my place in history more so than I already have. As far as opponents, I mean, I see obviously the one that never goes away is the trilogy with Cody. That's a sort of, that rivalry is just one of those things where the second that we made contact, it was just obvious that it was going to be a real significant rivalry. It was just chemistry. But there's been a lot of since the Rosa announcement, there's been a lot of talk about me and Moxley. There's been a lot of talk about me and Kenny Omega, and a lot of talk about me and Jericho. So, look, that's very flattering to me, because they're top guys, and I think of myself as a top guy. So, I mean, but ultimately it would just be about, again, coming in and making sure that my moment felt like the most important moment in the business.
Absolutely. Finally, I did want to ask you about the work you're doing with FITE. FITE has really come through over the years as the premier destination for combat sports and pro wrestling through their app, and now you're doing work with them as a special correspondent.
Yeah, you're right. FITE they've grown very steadily, and they're one of the few companies that have really experienced a great deal of growth in this COVID era. So, because basically a lot of promotions and live sports and things like that who were suddenly unable to have fans saw the ability to offer their most dedicated fans a chance to watch something, virtually on pay-per-view. And FITE, they just have what they've done so well is they've created a way to make it very easy. Pay-per-view once upon a time was considered such a major undertaking for a promotion to do. So difficult. You've got to get all the providers, and you've got to sort of you've got to make all these guarantees, you've got to put up all this money. And FITE, they completely simplified it, and it's proven to be very successful for them. And as a result, they've got a hell of a lot more programming than they used to, a hell of a lot more stuff to promote. And it actually it really stemmed from the initial discussions for Primetime Live, which will be our partnership with them and United Wrestling, starting on September 15th on FITE. And it stemmed from that because they basically called me to verify that I was going to be involved, which again, very flattering, that sort of they felt like it was important that I was involved, for them to sort of to take this on. And then the conversation kind of shifted to my aspirations to work as a broadcaster. And Mike Weber, who's the COO of FITE, he and I have known each other for years, dating back to when he worked at TNA. So he'd seen he knew that I had some aspirations to work in broadcasting, and he'd seen some of it. And he basically offered me the job and just said, we've got a lot more stuff going on, and we want somebody presentable, articulate, camera ready, who knows the industry. And he said, knows enough and carries enough sort of gravitas and credibility to talk to people in boxing and MMA and even other sports. And that was what really excited me, because if it was just to cover pro wrestling, I probably wouldn't have been that interested, because it would have felt strange for me to be covering, the genre that I'm sort of so heavily involved in as a talent. But I'm a big boxing fan, a big MMA fan. And I've always had a view to getting into broadcasting, particularly sports. So it's a perfect sort of foray into that endeavor for me. And I've got a couple under my belt already. I talked to Carlos Molina last week ahead of a boxing event happening in Mexico on Mexican Independence Day weekend. And then I talked to Go Giazaki last night ahead of the NOAH N1 Victory League. So yeah, it's been fun. And it's another string to my bow. I like to stay busy and challenge myself.
Right. And you mentioned earlier you're going to be defending the NWA heavyweight title against Mike Bennett here coming up on the 15th, primetime live on the new pay-per-view series on FITE Network. This is your first match since the pandemic, correct?
No, actually, I just wrestled in Dallas Fort Worth on Saturday. But yeah, no. There's nothing worse than when you've got all these. You think you've got all your ducks in a row, and then it's like, nope, not right. No, but that one was my first. Yeah, that one was my first since probably March, I guess, was when the pandemic stuff really got. I remember that I was literally about to fly to Puerto Rico when all the stuff was getting really serious, and it was the first time in my career that I basically said I don't want to go. And I was set to wrestle Carlito, and I was working for the Colognes. I have obviously great respect for them, and I basically it got to that point where it was just really dicey, and I wasn't so much worried about safety as I was about flights getting grounded and me getting stuck on the island.
Right.
So I kind of expressed that, and Primo and the Colognes were super cool about it, and we agreed that we'll revisit that somewhere down the road. But prior to that, I mean, I think the last time I wrestled prior to that, I think, was a tag match. So it's like it's been a minute. Yeah. It's gonna be interesting, because it's like the match I had in Dallas the other night was fine. It was good, solid, kind of what I consider my kind of standard level independent sort of local match. But this one, it's pay-per-view, and it's our show. It's our brand, so it have to deliver. So it's doing a lot of work, doing a lot of conditioning stuff to try to replicate it as much as possible. My best friend Tom Latimer, he's a trainer at a school about an hour away from here, so I've been making quite a few trips down there to try to sort of work off some of the rust.
I was going to ask, like, if bumping, if that you have to relearn that or anything, like if the muscle memory just comes back, or
people always have this. They always have this assumption that, it must be nice, because all these sort of nagging injuries get to heal up and things like that. And I'm sure from an overall health perspective, that's accurate, but wrestling has this sort of weird pseudoscience to it where, like, sometimes it could, like, time off can be the worst thing,
right?
Because all your body sort of resets, like all this sort of scar tissue and calluses and stuff all kind of dissipate, and then everything feels just awful. Like the first time you take a bump again, you go, wait, I was doing this all the time. Like, how did this happen? Yeah. So it definitely takes a bit, and but the adrenaline, takes care of a bit of that. But again, that's another weird thing too, because if there's no audience, right, it's like the adrenaline isn't quite there as much. It's still there, but it's not quite the same. It's a little more it's more nerve-wracking. Like, it's
Mhm.
hard to explain, but like one of the least nervous matches I ever had was All In.
Mm.
Like, because my biggest anxiety going into a match is whether or not the people are going to give a shit.
Right.
So with All In, I didn't have that because I knew the day before that we were the true main event of that show. I knew that we were going to get the biggest reaction. Like, I knew in my heart that we were going to be the ones that everybody was talking about afterwards.
Yeah.
So then I didn't have the butterflies. I didn't have the. Oh, sorry. We've got a huge thunderstorm happening here, and we have a storm alarm thing that goes off when there's lightning close by.
Okay.
Sorry.
I thought
But yeah,
I
no,
thought
I
it was
was
in my house. I was like, oh no.
no, and it's but so yeah, it's weird because people often ask you about that. Like, isn't it scary to go out in an arena with thousands of people? It's like I'm way more. It's way worse going out in like a small building in front of a couple of hundred.
Yeah.
Like, because it's awkward.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's why I could never be an actor, because I hate auditioning. Like, auditions for me are just like the worst. Like, going into a room with like 3 people just standing there and then trying to sort of turn it on is, like, for me, for a wrestler, it's so unnatural, because like I need the audience there to sort of flip a switch. And
Right.
if there's no audience, it's hard for me to do that. I have great respect for actors that have the ability to do that.
That's awesome. Well, it's great that to see you guys starting back this month and getting back to getting the shows going, and we'll keep following you guys. And thank you so much, Nick, for taking the time to do this.
No worries. Thank you, Raj.